Watch a freight train roll by and count the locomotives on the front. 2, 3, sometimes 4 of them chained together, hauling the whole thing down the line. And if you look closely, you will notice something that makes no sense at all. They are not all facing the same way. The lead engine points forward like you would expect, but right behind it, the next one is facing backwards, pointing the wrong way, running down the track in reverse, its blunt end leading for the entire trip. It looks like a mistake. It looks like somebody in the yard hooked it up wrong and nobody noticed. Your brain tells you a locomotive is supposed to face forwards, the way a car does, so a backwards one must be getting dragged along the wrong way round. But it is not a mistake. It is completely deliberate every single time. And the real reason is one of those things that seems baffling until you hear it, and then it is so obvious you wonder how you never worked it out. Before we get into it, hit subscribe and drop a comment letting us know where you're watching from. We want to know who's out there. Start with the single fact that unlocks the whole thing, because almost everyone gets this wrong. A locomotive does not have a good direction and a bad direction. It runs exactly as well backwards as it does forwards. Here is why. A diesel locomotive does not drive its wheels the way your car does, with an engine bolted through a gearbox to the axles. The diesel engine runs a generator, and the electricity from that generator feeds electric motors on the axles, called traction motors, and those motors spin the wheels. And an electric motor does not care which way it turns. Feed the current one way, it spins forwards. Feed it the other way, it spins backwards, with exactly the same power. There is a lever in the cab called the reverser that does precisely that, flips the direction, and the locomotive will pull just as hard, just as fast in reverse as it will going forward. It is not like a car at all. It is completely symmetrical. So a backwards locomotive is not being dragged, and it is not weaker, and it is not wasting fuel. It is pulling its full weight, doing its full share, just pointing the other way. The direction it faces makes no difference at all to how the train runs. Once you understand that, the real question flips around. If it does not matter which way they face, then why bother turning any of them around at all? And that is the actual answer. They face backwards because turning a locomotive around is a slow, expensive pain, and railroads will do almost anything to avoid it. Think about it. A locomotive cannot just do a 3-point turn in the road like a car. It is stuck on the rails. To physically spin one around so it faces the other way, a railroad needs a special, expensive piece of infrastructure, and there are only 3 real options. The first is a turntable, a giant rotating bridge in a pit that the locomotive drives onto, and then the whole platform spins around. They are wonderful old machines, but they are costly to build, costly to maintain, and they can only turn one locomotive at a time. The second is a Y, a triangular arrangement of track that lets a locomotive do the equivalent of a 3-point turn, backing and pulling through the triangle until it comes out facing the other way. Ys are cheaper than turntables, but they eat up a huge amount of land. The third is a balloon loop, a giant teardrop of track that curls all the way around, so the locomotive drives in one way and comes out facing the other. But a loop needs an enormous amount of space, more than almost anywhere can spare. Every one of those costs money, takes time, takes land, and takes the train out of service while it happens. In the age of steam, this was simply a fact of life, because a steam locomotive really did have a wrong way round. It was built to run forwards, with the crew looking out over the boiler, and running one backwards for any real distance meant terrible visibility and an unhappy crew. So every engine terminal was built around the machinery of turning. The great roundhouses, those beautiful semicircular buildings, existed precisely because a turntable sat at their heart, spinning each locomotive to point it back the right way. Turning engines was a constant, daily, labor-intensive chore, and on a modern railroad running trains around the clock, time spent turning a locomotive is still time and money wasted, only now there is a way to avoid almost all of it. So the railroads found a beautifully simple trick to avoid it almost entirely. When they couple a group of locomotives together, they deliberately point one forward and the next one backward, back to back. And here is the payoff. When that train reaches the end of its run, The crew does not have to turn anything around at all. They just walk to the locomotive on the other end, which is already facing the opposite way, climb into its cab, and drive off in the new direction. The whole set of locomotives never gets turned. The crew simply changes ends. A locomotive that was facing backwards on the way out is now the leader facing forwards on the way home. It was never wrong way round. It was just ready for the return trip the entire time. That is the real reason, and it is pure practicality. A backwards-facing locomotive in a consist is a locomotive that has already solved the problem of the return journey before the train has even left. But there is a second, older version of this that goes even deeper, and it is where the story gets really interesting. Because there were railroads that ran their locomotives backwards, long hood first, as their normal everyday forward direction. On purpose, all the time. A road switcher locomotive has a long hood on one end covering the engine and a short hood on the other. Most railroads decided the short hood was the front because it gives the crew a better view. But two big American railroads, the Southern Railway and the Norfolk and Western, did the opposite. They ran their locomotives with the long hood forward, the big blunt end leading, as standard practice for decades. Now, there is a story you will hear repeated everywhere about why they did it. People will tell you it was for crew safety, that the long hood out front acted like a giant crumple zone, a shield of metal between the crew and anything they might hit. And it sounds convincing. But according to the railroad historians who have actually dug into it, that was at best a minor side benefit. It was not the real reason. The real reason, again, was avoiding the cost of turning locomotives around. Southern and Norfolk and Western set their locomotives up to run equally well in both directions, with the controls arranged so the engineer could work either way and still sit on the correct side to see the trackside signals, which in America are almost always on the right. By building their fleet to run long hood forward and backward with equal ease, these railroads could skip the turntables and the whyas and the terminal delays entirely and just send a locomotive straight back the way it came. It was the same logic as the backwards engine in the consist, baked right into how they designed and ran their whole fleet. Once again, the mystery that looks like it must be about safety or tradition or somebody's mistake turns out to be about the plain, unglamorous business of not wasting time and money turning heavy machines around. So the next time you are stopped at a crossing and you see a locomotive rolling past you backwards, blunt end first, looking for all the world like it got hooked up wrong, you will know the truth. Nobody made a mistake. That locomotive is facing exactly the way the railroad wants it to. It pulls just as hard in reverse as it does going forward, and it is pointing backwards for one simple, clever reason. So that when the train reaches the far end of the line, it is already facing home.